And so, we come to Ranjani Shettar. Shanay will have more images of Ranjani's work, and we will hear a longer conversation between the two of them. But I'll leave you with just one image of her work. The first work of Ranjani's that I saw at the Art Gallery in New York about 15 years ago. I remember walking into the work literally, much to Deepak's palpitations. I think it was hard. He was a little bit concerned that I may have consumed too much wine before walking into the work. But the work was, this incredible mix of sensibility and strength. And how the heck did it stay up? And I realized that this was something about Ranjani. She, over a period of time, I realized she has trouble with gravity. But hopefully, those discussions will emerge out of the next 30 minutes of conversation. Yes. And then I met Ranjani. I was just utterly charmed and in awe of her ability. And I realized that she actually mirrored her work, her sensitivity and her strength. And that is what you see in her work. Since that time, Ranjani has exhibited at, and now I need to actually go to my notes because the list is very long, at the ICA Boston, MoMA, SF MoMA, Guggenheim, the Met, and there are many more. She's in the permanent collection of most, if not all, of those museums, including now at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Today, Ranjani will be in conversation with Shanay Jhaveri. Shanay is the Assistant Curator, South Asian Art within the Department of Modern and Contemporary Art at the Met, a graduate of Brown University with a BA in Art Semiotics and the History of Art and Architecture. Shanay has a PhD in Curator and Critical Studies from the Royal College of Art. His recent exhibitions include Everything We Do Is Music in 2017, co-curated Get in India, also 2017, Compatible Silences in 2013. Shanay's curated film programs for Light Industry, New York, Cambridge University, Lux ICA, Ineva, Tate Modern, and the third edition of the Dhaka Art Summit. He's also written 3 books, Western Artists in India, Creative Inspirations in Art and Design, Outside of Films in India, 1950 to 1990, and Chandigarh is in India, 2016. He has published widely in various art journals and is a contributor editor to Frieze. Shanay is also the curator in charge of the 2018 Met Roof Commission. So for, I think all of his achievements are just to make everyone else look bad. But in spite of that, I am proud of Shanay. So, here we go, without any further ado. Shanay and Ranjani, please come and then.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dipanjana, Christie, for inviting me to be here in conversation with Ranjani and to continue celebrating a wonderful practice that is on view at the Met, and also there is a solo show at the Art Gallery in downtown. So do make a point to go and visit when you can. Thank you, Dipti, for your remarks and for setting us up. And I look forward to further debriefing with you after our conversation. So for the next 30 minutes, what I hope to do is to really walk us all through Ranjani's practice and the way her unique aesthetic language has evolved. So diving right into it, Ranjani, I'm going to ask you a very basic question.
Sure.
How did you come to make sculpture?
Simplest answer is that I think in 3 dimension. It's hard, it's an inability, I can say, it's hard to think in 2 dimension. It's like collapsing something that has volume into something that doesn't have volume. So it was very natural for me to be driven into sculpture, although I didn't know any technicality.
And you trained in sculpture as well at the Chitrakala in Bangalore.
Yes.
So what we have on screen is one of Ranjani's earliest works called Flow Into Me from 2000, and the next work is Transitions from 2003. already from these early works, one sees Ranjani's predilection for a particular kind of material, which is both man-made and natural. How did you come about finding not just the specific materials that are in these works, but gravitating to wanting to work with such a range of materials?
It's driven by the necessity. Whenever I thought of making a sculpture, I would think of the best possible way to put it across. And it often ended up being something flexible. It often ended up being not something conventional. So then I didn't hesitate using those materials because I was really experimenting and broadening my range and trying to work with anything new, and I was excited.
And so in the work which we have on screen right now from 2003, it's neem wood, seeds, and silicone. So the man-made and the natural materials are combined in your work, and we'll see more examples of this as we go forward. I would say a pivotal moment in the practice was this work from 2004, which Dipti already has shared with everyone, called Vasanta from 2004. What one sees over here is a scale. You achieve scale for the first time with this work. Can you talk us through this particular work and how you arrived?
In my practice, when I'm making anything, even if it's a small sculpture, even if it's just a few inches, right from the beginning, there was something that I was always going around the sculpture. I had to move. If I didn't move, I couldn't animate the sculpture. And then that left a trace later on. And I wanted to create something where it could possibly be an atmosphere, can be an environment where people can immerse themselves and then experience what I was experiencing. And it happened through this piece.
And in this piece, you have used beeswax and a cotton thread to achieve this mesmerizing effect.
Yeah, it was very interesting how I started on that, because when I started, they were just lines and dots for me, nothing more than that. And I couldn't determine whether a line was more important for me or a dot was more important for me. I started putting them together to form these environments, and it started with threads, and then I covered the nose with beeswax. And when it is lit up, and especially if there is natural light, there are times when strings disappear, and there are times when the beeswax disappears. And so I learned a lot about dynamics of light, dynamics of space through these pieces.
This is just a bit more from 2006, which was included in the MoMA show online.
Yeah.
And so what has happened with these works is that people have regarded them or related them to certain modernist practices. So people think of Nasreen Mohammadi's grid-like drawings and these as kind of animations of that. The Venezuelan artist Gego has also been referenced in regard to these works, and this sharing a similar sensibility of idea and method. So it's a detail. These are really works that one must have in hand in person. This is a work from 2006-2007 called Touch Me Not, and it is made up of hundreds, or is it thousands of, detail, of small little wooden sticks with a lacquer ball on it. Again, when I see this work, of course, you see kind of the kind of amazing mesmerizing quality, but you see the drawn line animated on the wall, but also what one sees is duration and labor. So can you talk about your practice in terms of the duration it takes for you to realize these sculptures, but also installing them, and what does it mean for you to work on something for an extended period of time?
time is something very important in different perspectives. For me, everything, all my sculptures, they're like a moment captured in time. There is something before that and there's something happening after that. So it's a moment and it's not frozen. It is something that suggests something more. So that is the sort of time I'm dealing with in some of the sculptures like this. But when I talk about the time it requires, there are things that I don't even know it's a potential idea for a sculpture when I put it in my sketchbook sometimes. I do very few sketches, but it is so momentary that it's fleeting. It's possible to lose that moment if I don't record it. And I come back to it much later. So for instance, if I'm doing something today, it could be something that I've thought of 10 years ago, and then it just doesn't stay the way I conceived of it 10 years ago. It evolves in that process. By the time I put my hand into making that, realizing that, start working with material, it kind of matures and comes out through these materials.
So, now, bear with me, I'm going to have to read the title of this book because it is a bit complicated. But it's from 2006, 2007, and it's called Me, No, Not Me, Buy Me, Eat Me, Wear Me, Have Me, No, Not Me. And Ranjani has remarked that the rural environment of India and now threatened reality have been a source of inspiration for Homer, so the natural phenomena amidst which you live. And I would say that in most of your work it's addressed elliptically or more obliquely, but this is one work which is far more direct in its criticality. So it was work which is made out of mild steel that you kind of foraged out of old car body parts. Can you talk a little bit more about this work and the particular kind of political exigency that is so readable in this versus other works in practice?
When I thought of making this piece, I went back a few centuries in time, whether it is in India or anywhere else. Our needs were very limited. Our needs for the household, domestic purposes, or anything was really basic. So if you went into domestic spaces, it was dominated by basketry and pottery, whichever culture it is, the material of where it comes from. So I took these car bodies, discarded car bodies. Some of them are from accidents. I cut them into strips and wove them into these forms which tell a story of their own and also tell a story of the excess, the world that we live in today. You know, it's never sufficient. It's never enough. We wanted to have more. So I wanted to play on that and put these sculptures together which look like they have a utilitarian aspect to them, but they really don't have anything. They only mimic that utilitarian aspect, and they're their own. And the colors that you see on them are the actual colors of the cars.
So this leads us to, I would say, another defining moment in the practice, which is a work from 2007, 2008 called Sun Sneezers Blow Light Bubbles, which I learned references a kind of a phenomena that some people experience when looking at the sun, they sneeze. And that was the inspiration for this, so kind of phenomenological experience of someone's engagement with nature and how that's distilled through these forms. But really why this is also, I think, an important moment in the practice is the technique that you start to work with, which you have evolved, and now it's most contemporary in its instantation of it is the work that is at the Met. So can you maybe walk us through the technique, which is the forms are made out of stainless steel and have been covered with muslin that has been dyed and then bound with tamarind paste. But if you could just give us the specific kind of the specifics of that process, and also how you adapted this technique for yourself, because it also speaks to an ethics that I see in your practice.
To start from the beginning, my sculptures are always called installations, and I call them sculptures. Thing is that, right from the beginning, they were always see-through, they were punctured, and they were linear. And this particular material allowed me to extend that further and distill it to just the bare minimum lines to animate it. So when I'm driven by choosing a material for the kind of image that's on my mind, this image was so light. So I had to look for something that is strong enough to hold its shape.
Yeah.
So I think like an engineer sometimes. I think about the stability. And then I came back with a research and I said, stainless steel is going to be the structure, that's going to be the skeleton of this form. And the easiest thing that I could have used at that point to match my desire, to match my idea, was to use rawhide. But for me, I couldn't convince myself to use rawhide because what I use in my artworks say a lot about what I'm trying to do, like whether I like it or not, they play as metaphors. So I had to choose a material that is not a byproduct of violence. Then muslin came in. But to achieve that, then I had to further push myself, find a binder that is not synthetic, that doesn't look industrially produced. Then I went to explore tamarind paste. And so it evolved. And now what you see at Met is, it establishes the range of this material that I've been using for over 10 years now.
And this technique was something you observed in a small town in Karnataka called Kinho,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So now I'm going to step away from your immersive installations to another part of the practice that is a little less discussed, which is your fascination with tools. Right. And these are works called Kinetics from 2009. So can you briefly talk to us about why the tool, of course, you use a range of tools to make your own work, but why making works of tools is of interest to you?
See, I'm somebody who's always working with hands. And I love it when people love their tools, especially carpenters. And these treasured tools that come from, that are passed from generation to generation, and how, people take care of them with love and keep them in their workshops. I took that because it also suggests a movement and something that can be held in hand. And I'm always looking at things, like I said before, there are a moment in time that have something before and after. And I'm trying to bring out latent energies that you don't perceive always. Something may appear still, but there are many things, many energies acting upon it for it to be still. So I'm very curious and interested in these invisible forces. I try to bring that across through these sculptures.
So moving on to, I would say, another important work, which is called Oriole from 2010, and it's the first time you worked in bronze.
Right.
And you connected your engagement with bronze to the historical tradition of Chola bronzes and the lost wax process.
Right.
So again, we have an example of Ranjani thinking about a historical technique and then kind of engaging with it for her own purposes or evolving it in her own work. Now, the other thing I'm going to talk about with this work, and this pervades most of your practice, is that you see the work installed here at the Liverpool Biennial and here in New Delhi at the Bar Gallery, and the form of the installation is completely different. And so I wanted to talk to you about how your works react or respond to different spaces that they need to be in. So what I've been calling site-responsive rather than site-specific. So can we maybe dwell on a little bit about how you think about a space and your works adapt to those spaces or, engage with those spaces?
For me, thinking about space is very crucial because as an artist, when I engage with an artwork, physically I'm immersing myself in that, and I want to give the pleasure of that. And I want to share that with my audience. So whenever I've had a chance or to know the space, of course that comes, and I work with that in my mind. But more than that, it's not so much about a particular physical space, but making the work adapt to these spaces to impart that same essence.
So moving along now, we reach another point in the practice, which is your ongoing love affair with wood.
Yes.
And as a medium that you've been invested in and kind of explored for since, I would say, the beginning of your practice, from 2003. So the way you work with wood is it's found wood, generally rosewood or teak. But what I look at it, what I see is that it's a reductive practice where you take the found wood and you kind of reduce it and create these kind of these very sensual forms. There's a sensuality to it. But what attracts you to the material of wood? And I have a sense of what it does, what attracts you to it, but I'm going to let you talk about it. And also with works like this, the idea of opposing forces and how you kind of manage to channel that into a form.
Yeah, I like the sheer materiality, its physicality, its weight, and the way I can engage with the sculpture. And it's fascinating for me to see the sculpture come alive through its grains, a material that was alive at one time, and it has its traces very much there. And it is something that, I carve on it, and every single day with my engagement, I uncover certain parts of it. And I cannot start on a piece saying that I know everything that I want to do with this. So that's the best part of it. I start working and then it starts to reveal more and more about itself. And then at one point I have to step back and allow the sculpture to dominate, the material to dominate, and then go with the flow. I have to speak with the piece, allow it to say what it wants to be. And I really love that part of it.
And this notion of historical time, I know, is of great importance to you.
Right. And when it comes to wood, I wish I were practicing in the times when I didn't have to think of our ecological, footprint. But since we are forced to think about it, I prefer to use wood that has been used once at least, and then I salvage that wood and I use that, or I try to use a wood that is fast growing and that supplies into paper industry or something.
So I'm going to move us along to two works that a group of works. So this is Heliotropes from 2005 to 2011, in which you use latex. And then, so Heliotropes, and then I want to move to this work, which is High Tide for a Blue Moon 2012. And in both these works, we'll come back to the slide that's between them, I see a kind of primeval energy, a kind of force coursing through them, and think about them as, the parasitic nature of the parasitic aspect of nature, this slightly more primeval aspect of nature. But also they've been thought of in terms of modern day technology and questions of the network. How does that sit with you? And I'm very interested in this idea of the primeval in relation to your other works in the practice, because I do think these stand out in a sense, this one and Heliotropes, as there's a rougher, raw quality to them than some of the other more refined works.
when you think of invisible energies, they all have different sort of nature. Some can be very subtle or subdued, and there are some that are robust. So I'm trying to capture that which is more robust in the heliotropes. And yeah, so they have a lot of force going through them.
So the work, the slide that interrupted the two works is a work, it's basically another part of Ranjani's practice that I do want to draw attention to, and I don't know if we have time to really dwell on it, is her works on paper. And this is an artist book that she did called Varsha. And I wish we had more time to discuss it, but just being mindful, and there are a few more things that I want to work through. But it's an important part of the practice, and Ranjani uses wood to create her prints, and they're generally barter sculptures as well. And I wish we had more time, I'm sorry, but we'll have to move on to this book, which is called Fire in a Belly from 2007. And what I didn't mention about the earlier work, which was High Tide for a Blue Moon, is that these are works which show this melding of the natural and the man-made. So here we have pieces of wood which have been suspended but covered with automobile paint. And what I want to talk to you about with regard to this work is, I think, one of the more singular, the more defining features of your practice, which is this ability to evoke lightness.
It is a challenge to make them float rather than sink, especially given their weight. So that is the challenge I enjoy pursuing, and work with. Yeah, maybe the way I will resolve gravity will be different until the day I'm commissioned to make a sculpture for somewhere on the moon or something.
Also, you're a daughter of an engineer, so hence that kind of, is there in your mind.
It's always there.
So this is a work which is actually on view in the galleries downstairs, which I urge everyone to go and see. This is another work which is, again, you see this interest in suspension. This work is one of Ranjani's most recent pieces, which is on view at the Art Gallery, called Meandering Lines, Searching Rivers. And it's bent wood, and again, could you maybe just walk us through the scale of how you achieve this and the fluidity of this?
There is something about scale. If there is an idea and it has a predetermined scale to it, it cannot be smaller or it cannot be larger than what it is supposed to be in. It just changes the proportion completely and then it spoils it. So I really go with what is required for that. This is about 30 feet in width, and it could have worked in, say, like 5 feet or something. For it to have that sort of immersive quality, for it to flow like that. But to tell you the truth, it was very easy to make it when I made it with paper for a maquette.
And then we come to the work which is at the Met, which is called 7 Ponds and a Few Raindrops. And I have to say we're just delighted and thrilled that it's joined the museum's permanent collection as a gift from the TIA collection. And I would say that for me this work marks another important moment in the practice in a couple of ways. One, the forms in themselves are quite complex, they're double tiered, and there are other elements to them, but also the technique that you started working with in Sun Sneezers has evolved, and you've used 3 different types of dyes in this work. And that's the other thing I wanted to maybe discuss with you, is that you engage with a range of craft traditions or traditions that are specific to like localities in Karnataka and in India. But what it is not a wholesale application of it, but you evolve that technique and you engage with it and you find your own kind of association with it. And so could we maybe dwell on that a little bit more and talk about the journey you have with these techniques and these materials, and not only with this work, but with a range of other works as well.
Yeah, sometimes I wish there were, ready-made techniques available to just use, just get it out of the tube and then naked. But, the idea pushes me further every time. Like when I conceive of a sculpture that is colorful, then I have to find a way to make it colorful. And that is good for the piece, good for my practice, as in, something that I'm not using excessive chemical or something that talks about sustainability. That is meaningful to me, and in today's time, I would like to speak about that, and then speak about that through my artwork.
I have two more questions before we open it. We invite Dipti to join us. So the first of the last two questions is that your work, it's been remarked and people see it as very joyful, and it is, it gives people a kind of sense of elevation when they see it. But you've said that melancholy, boredom, and solitude are really important to you as the way you come to make these very joyful works. And again, for me, that is very compelling to hear that that is something that you court actively.
Right. Because I think it's in melancholy, it is in solitude that I feel like myself. That is my real self. And that's when I'm in commune with my own spirit and I come up with these ideas. And because I dwell on them for such a long time, there is a desire to elevate myself and to feel good, feel happy. I'm engaging with them for such a long period. And that's probably what comes across, and that's what I will share with the world.
And my final question to you is, and this is what I am most energized by in your work, is this incredible commitment to abstraction and to the value that abstraction can provide as a formal tool in prompting reflection in audiences, and making your audience engage with some of these other concerns that are important to you personally, but also socially. And so, why abstraction?
Because I think that's the easiest way to put things across. It gets too particular when it is not abstract, and this abstraction opens up a range to enjoy, a range to question, a range to dwell upon. So I'm seeking that, and that's my tool.
Thank you, Ranjani.
You're welcome.
Can everybody hear me? Loud? That's fine. All right. So Ranjani has answered lots and lots of questions. I'm going to ask you just one, and then let's put Shanay on the spot for a little bit. What are your future projects, your future plans?
I have some unfinished works in my studio. So I get back to finishing those wooden sculptures.
Okay.
So when I get back, I have some things waiting for me in the studio, and I am going to start working towards a show at Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C. So yeah, with my practice, it's really hard for me to bring everything to a standstill and then just part with every sculpture in the studio. So it's like I need to have my emotional anchors. So I usually work on more than 2 pieces at a time so that, I'm not left alone. So I have some.
All right, maybe 2 questions. You work with a range of materials.
Right.
What have you not worked with that you want to?
I want to work with everything that is tactile. But, my only limitation is that with time, now I've come to question the sustainability part. So that's my limitation. Otherwise, I want to work with every available material on this planet.
Thank you. So, Shanay, you're in charge, we'll start with the easy ones. You're in charge of the roof pension.
Yes.
How are you approaching that?
So the artist who has been selected for this year's Roof Commission is Huma Bhabha, who Dipti has already mentioned in her remarks. And when we were thinking about who we wanted to invite for this year's Roof Commission, I think for Sheena, myself, and the department, it was an artist whose practice demonstrates an ability to engage with a historic tradition of sculpture, but also whose work speaks to the very particular moment we're in. And I think that Huma's very powerful and arresting works do engage with the social-political scenario that we're immersed in, but they also have this incredibly distinctive quality, and that's why it made her the right artist for the Roof Commission. Also, she engages with not only the various traditions of figurative sculpture from Asia to Africa to Greek and Roman, but there is this great interest in popular culture and science fiction and horror film. And that creates another avenue for people to engage with her practice. It allows a number of allegorical narratives to be set into motion, and that's something I think people will hopefully experience and see when we open the commission on the 16th of April.
It should be very exciting. Speaking of engaging across time periods and across different peoples, what do you view as the role of the museum in that context? Ever-shifting, what are the dynamic changes happening, population shifts happening? How do you reconcile that with what the museum should show? And also, not just necessarily the Met, in general the museum, but also the Met. And how does that, how do those play out with support that the museum needs in order for those shifts to happen?
So I'll take the question in two parts. So I'll speak from a position of being a curator at the Met, and I think your question is reflected in the way the Met has also, the way the Met itself has engaged that question, which is through the appointment of Sheena Wagstaff as the chairperson of modern and contemporary art at the museum. So South Asia and work from South Asia has been collected at the museum across 8 different departments, and it's a major part of our holdings. And our modern and contemporary department was established in 1968 by Henry Gelsaler. But modern and contemporary work from across the world was a persistent blind spot. And with the appointment of Sheena and her vision for the department, it was to kind of create specific positions that would reflect these various regions that are well represented in the museum's collection, but also recognizing that times and the landscape of the world around the museum has shifted, and the museum has to kind of grapple with that shift. So I would say that my being there in our department is a kind of answer to your question. And I think museums do this in different ways. I think the way the Tate or the MoMA does it, they have to reflect back on their own institutional histories and engage with the specificity of that history and see how they want to continue to maybe build associations or relationships with other parts of the world. Now, the second question that you asked, which is that when museums belatedly start to engage with the non-West, how do they go about doing that? And I think, again, it comes back to, as I said, the specificity of the institutional history. So for me, the challenge is how do you introduce modern and contemporary art into the chronology that the Met has set up for itself, and however peculiar that chronology might be, it's an art history of its own, which, as you walk through the building, it like collapses time and space and topography. How does one do it? Do you just go in there and do something which is like catch-up, and catch-up modernism, and you plug holes? Or do you take a slightly more interventionist or bolder step? And that's, I think, we are working through that as a department. We are asking those questions constantly our exhibition program at Royer reflects the ambition, but also the scope of that kind of questioning, and our collection building, which is an ongoing process. We haven't arrived at where we need to, but we're endeavoring to go there, and the engagement of, or the introduction of work like Ranjani's into the collection, in those spaces, it is a bit disruptive when you come into it and you see all these well-known Western masterpieces, and in the middle of that you have 7 tons and a few raindrops, and I think that sense of disruption is perhaps necessary and important at this point. And to get the support for it, we're hoping that people are engaged by our endeavor and want to be generous.
Thank you. Thank you, Shanay. Thank you, Ranjani. We will open to the audience right now for any questions you might have.
So the piece that's there at the Met, obviously some of the examples you've shown are in very flat lighting, this is very dramatic lighting. So how do you plan ahead and how much you're involved in the lighting, because that seems to really change the look of your work.
Right. I'm very involved in designing the light for the pieces. The truth is I like natural light. So, when I'm working in my own studio, when I have natural light, I always feel it is the best. But when I move into a space and then light is out, it just becomes completely different with dramatic lighting, and I enjoy both personalities of the same artwork.
I have a question actually. I was just wondering about the permanence of the art, like you're talking about brass and stone, like the Cholas used to do. I mean, do you ever wonder whether your art will kind of disappear, last forever?
As a sculptor, I'm working with something that is three-dimensional, that is meant to last. And there is a spectrum. And according to me, nothing is ever permanent. Metal can melt and stone can crack. So,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, and no insects like beeswax. So they're quite safe.
That's true.
As a collector, I can buy something that I can afford and I like. And I'm not thinking about its future. But in a museum, how do you select your artists? How do you know he or she's going to be serious, or is he just going to drop out? How do you do it?
I think departments and museums make those qualifications. There are different ways in which those qualifications are made for various museums, and I think for us, and for me particularly with the task that I have, which is evolving a collection of South Asian art, I think I'm guided by, art history being the primary kind of lead forward, which is to think about the context of this artist's work, not necessarily only within their own region or their own national context, but also within a much wider art history. And I think there is this growing trend now within contemporary scholarly writing is to assume a bifocal lens, looking at works in relation to one another rather than siloing artists in particular kind of categories. And so I think we go about making our acquisitions or our evaluation based on this shifting terrain of how we understand art history and how certain artists sit alongside maybe their peers in the region that they're working in, but also other artists who the work has resonances with, but who they may necessarily not have ever met or engaged with. And that's one of the endeavors of the Modern and Contemporary Department at the Met, is to kind of draw up these connections not only within particular moments, but also between the ancient and the modern, or the contemporary and the ancient. And that has been reflected in our exhibitions. Kerry James Marshall went across various departments of the museum, and within his own exhibition embedded work that inspired him, and not only in a pseudomorphic way. So it's not necessarily work that visually looks like the work of the artist, but there is an underlying kind of energy to that work that engages them. So I think those are all the kind of criteria that come into making an evaluation or judgment. And also I think museums have to be careful about, you know, when they're looking at contemporary work in particular, the place of the market in relation to that and how that impacts a market. And it is a tenuous kind of affair that museums in the market have, and it's just how one is able to play with that in a responsible manner. It's a tough one, yes.
It seems like it looks like the sculpture is kind of floating. I see how you said that it's sculpture to you and not an installation. Do you have to go to each location to physically kind of install the works? Because it seems the way that this photo looks, for example, it looks like it's floating so effortlessly, and that must take a lot of time and thought. Do you have to go to each location?
I mean, as of now, yes, like I do go everywhere, most of the places, but installation is meticulously recorded. So, there is something for posterity. It can be installed in another space by another person. And some of them have been done by us.